Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive you won't soon forget. We're tackling the work of Sergio Leone.
A true cinematic icon.
You got that right.
Hmm.
And I know you're interested in going deep, especially on the good, the bad, and the ugly.
A classic.
It really is, and we'll get to that. But I also know you're interested in how he influenced other directors too.
A huge topic.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, Leone's impact on filmmaking is undeniable, especially his unique style of Westerns.
Yeah.
He just completely redefined the genre.
Absolutely. And to really get Leone, you kind of have to understand how he flipped the script on traditional Westerns, like his films starting with A Fistful of Dollars. Those are what we call spaghetti
Oh,
Westerns.
yeah.
They broke away from that typical Hollywood formula, and they offered this much grittier and more morally complex perspective.
Okay, so less John Wayne and more Clint Eastwood squinting out in the desert sun.
You got it. Leone's heroes, like Eastwood's man with no name character, they weren't, those classic white hat good guys. They were driven by survival, by greed, and often a very skewed sense of honor. And this really resonated with audiences who were maybe tired of the black and white morality of the traditional Western.
That makes sense. And it wasn't just the characters either. Like, the entire visual style of those films was different.
Oh, absolutely. Filming in locations like Spain and Italy gave them a very unique look. And he wasn't afraid to use those extreme close-ups so you could study a character's face, their eyes. He would build tension slowly.
Yeah.
And then, bam! He hits you with these sweeping panoramic shots of the landscape.
That's so cool.
It created this really epic and almost operatic feel.
Operatic. That's a great word to describe it. And speaking of opera, we can't forget about Ennio Morricone.
Oh, of course.
His music is so much more than just, background noise. It's practically a character in itself.
You're right, and it was completely intentional. Leone would involve Morricone from the very beginning of the filmmaking process.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They would discuss the scenes, the themes, even specific shots, and Morricone would compose music before they even started filming.
Wow. So the music was shaping the visuals as much as the visuals were inspiring the music.
Exactly.
That's incredible. You don't see that level of collaboration every day.
Absolutely. And their collaboration really reached its peak in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the film you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's the one I'm so curious about.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by that film. I mean, I know it's considered a masterpiece, but what makes it so special in the context of Leone's whole career?
I think this film is the culmination of everything Leone built in his Dollars trilogy.
Mm.
You've got three unforgettable characters, Blondie, Angel Eyes, and Tuco, each of them driven by their own desires, sometimes working together and sometimes at odds with each other. This complex dance of greed and survival. And then you layer Morricone's music on top of that,
Oh, yeah.
his iconic whistles, the Ecstasy of Gold theme. It elevates the entire film to another level.
I totally agree. I remember the first time I heard that Ecstasy of Gold thing, and it's just so powerful and haunting.
It really is.
You can't help but get swept up in the emotion of it all.
Right. It's the perfect example of how Morricone uses music to not just accompany the action, but to actually tell a story,
Yeah.
to reveal the inner lives of the characters.
That's so cool. I'm curious, how did using the Civil War as a backdrop affect the film? It's not your typical setting for a Western.
It was a brilliant choice by Leone. The Civil War becomes more than just the setting. It becomes a character in itself.
I like that.
It throws these three men together, it forces them into these uneasy alliances, and ultimately it reveals that dark side of human nature when faced with chaos and violence.
Yeah, so it sounds like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is more than just a shoot-'em-up Western. There's a deeper layer of social commentary in there.
Oh, absolutely. And that depth is one of the reasons why it continues to fascinate audiences today.
Yeah.
It works on multiple levels. You can enjoy it as a thrilling adventure, but it also has something to say about human nature, about greed, and about the choices we make in extreme circumstances.
You mentioned how Leone's films broke away from traditional Westerns. What were some of the specific techniques he used that made his films so unique?
Well, one of the most striking things about Leone's directing is his masterful use of time and pacing. He was not afraid to let a scene breathe, to build tension slowly through these lingering shots and pregnant pauses. He understood the power of silence, of letting the audience fill in the gaps with their own imaginations.
It's true. I've always felt that his films have a very deliberate pace, which is almost the opposite of what you see in a lot of modern action movies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a testament to his skill as a filmmaker that he can keep the audience on the edge of their seats, even when there's very little dialogue or action happening on screen. It's all about the build-up, the anticipation.
And then when the action does finally erupt, it's explosive.
It really is.
I'm thinking about that iconic three-way standoff scene at the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The tension is almost unbearable.
Oh, that scene is a masterclass in cinematic suspense. Leone uses those close-ups, the extreme wide shots, and of course Morricone's score to just ratchet up the tension until it feels like the whole world is holding its breath. And it's a sequence that has been imitated countless times, but never quite replicated.
That's true. It's funny you mentioned how other directors have been influenced by Leone. I feel like I see his fingerprints everywhere in modern cinema.
Oh, you're absolutely right. His influence is massive, and it goes far beyond just the Western genre. I mean, you have directors like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez who wear their Leone influences on their sleeves.
Oh, yeah.
But then you can also see his impact on filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and the Coen brothers, who might not be making Westerns, but who share that same love of visual storytelling and operatic scope.
That's so true. It's amazing to think that a director who made his name with gritty Westerns could have such a wide-reaching influence on cinema as a whole.
It really is.
What do you think it is about Leone's work that resonates so strongly with other filmmakers?
I think it's his ability to tell stories that are both epic and intimate, that work on both a visceral and intellectual level. He understood the power of myth-making, of creating these larger-than-life characters and situations, but he also never lost sight of the human element at the heart of it all.
That's true.
You know, his films are about something more than just cowboys and gunslingers. They're about the choices we make, the battles we fight, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
That's a great way to put it. He was a master of capturing the human condition within these epic operatic stories.
Yeah.
And that's something that transcends genres and time periods. It's something that will always resonate with audiences.
Exactly. And I think that's why we're still talking about Sergio Leone today, all these years after his last film. He tapped into something timeless, something universal.
Yeah.
His films are a reminder that even in the grittiest, most brutal worlds, there's still beauty, there's still hope, there's still a story worth telling.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from spaghetti westerns to iconic standoffs to Leone's lasting influence on cinema. But I'm really eager to dive even deeper into the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay.
There's so much more to unpack there.
Absolutely. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface. Let's take a closer look at some of the key scenes, the characters, and how this film cemented Leone's legacy as a true cinematic visionary.
I can't wait.
Okay, so let's really dig into the good, the bad, and the ugly now.
Yes, I mean, this is a film that deserves like a whole deep dive just on its own.
Absolutely.
I've seen it several times, and every time I watch it, I feel like I discover something new.
Oh, yeah.
But for someone who hasn't had the pleasure of seeing this film, how would you describe the story at its core?
Well, you know, imagine like a treasure hunt set against the backdrop of the American Civil War.
Interesting.
You've got three gunslingers, Blondie, who's the good, Angel Eyes, the bad, and Tuco, the ugly.
Right.
And they're all after this hidden stash of Confederate gold. Oh, wow.
Their paths keep intersecting. They form these alliances. They betray each other along the way.
Wow. So there's the gold, the driving force.
Right.
But it feels like there's just so much more going on beneath the surface.
Oh, exactly. I mean, greed is a major theme, of course, but, it also explores survival, loyalty, and even the absurdity of war itself.
Right.
Leone doesn't shy away from the brutality of the conflict, but he also finds these moments of humor and humanity amidst all the chaos.
It's true. Something that's always stood out to me is how Leone uses silence.
Oh, yeah.
There are these long stretches where very little is actually said, but the actors' expressions and the music just speak volumes.
Oh, that's one of Leone's, trademarks.
Yeah.
He understood the power of letting a moment breathe.
Right.
Letting the tension build organically. Like a great example of this is the final standoff scene in the cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
Adding dialogue to that would only diminish the suspense he creates just through visuals and sound.
And the sound. I mean, Morricone's score is phenomenal.
It's incredible. It's like he created a whole soundscape for the film.
Yeah.
A world of its own.
Well, and what's really fascinating is how he uses distinct musical themes for each character.
I never noticed that.
Blondie has his iconic whistle, Angel Eyes, gets that sinister operatic motif, and then Tuco's theme is almost comical.
Oh, that's right.
Which reflects his bumbling personality.
Yes. Those little details are what make the film so rich and memorable.
Right.
It's really no wonder that countless filmmakers have been inspired by it.
Well, and you think about someone like Tarantino and how he uses music,
Okay.
especially in Kill Bill, he uses existing songs, but they're so carefully chosen that they
Yeah.
become part of the fabric of the film, just like Morricone's scores for Leone.
Oh, I see the parallels there for sure.
Yeah.
And it's not just the music, is it? You
Yeah.
can see Leone's influence in Tarantino's like action sequences, the way he uses slow motion, even the way he writes dialogue.
You know, one scene that always comes to mind is the Mexican standoff in Reservoir Dogs. That is pure Leone in terms of tension and visual style. You can almost hear Morricone's music playing, even though it's a completely different score.
I know it's true. It's incredible how Leone's influence just transcends genre.
Absolutely.
I mean, he didn't just make Westerns. He created like a cinematic language that continues to shape filmmaking today.
He really did. He was a true master.
Yeah.
And his films were art. You know, they really pushed the boundaries of storytelling.
Okay, so now focusing back on the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's this scene that I've always been captivated by. It's the bridge sequence.
Okay.
Blondie and Tuco are trying to blow up this bridge.
Yes, a perfect example of Leone's mastery of suspense.
Tell me about it.
He takes his time, lets the tension build as Blondie and Tuco are planting the explosives, all while this battle is raging around them with Union and Confederate soldiers clashing.
And that incredible score by Morricone.
Right.
It's like this musical countdown to the explosion.
Yeah, and then just when you think the bridge is about to go, Leone cuts away
Oh, he does.
to a completely different scene.
He loves to do that.
He leaves you hanging wondering, did they actually pull it off or not,
Right.
It's brilliant manipulation of the audience's expectations.
It's so good. And then, of course, we eventually see the bridge explode in all its glory.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's spectacular, even by today's standards.
Oh, absolutely.
What I think is fascinating about that scene, and the whole film really, is how Leone uses the Civil War as this backdrop.
Right.
But he doesn't get bogged down in the historical details.
Right. It's not about that.
It's more about the human drama that's playing out against this chaotic backdrop.
Exactly. He's interested in the moral compromises that people make in those extreme situations.
Right.
The bonds that form the betrayals that inevitably occur.
So it's not just a Western. It's like a commentary on the human condition.
Precisely. And that's why The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly still resonates so strongly today.
I agree.
It's a timeless story about greed survival and searching for meaning in a world that's gone mad.
You've really articulated what makes this film so
It's
special.
like a great film.
Leone managed to pack so many layers of meaning into this thrilling, visually stunning package.
Yeah, he was a true visionary.
He was.
And, I think we've barely scratched the surface of his influence on modern filmmaking.
Yeah,
There are so many directors who owe a debt to Leone, whether they realize it or not.
absolutely. Let's delve a little deeper into that.
Yeah.
Who are some of the directors who have carried Leone's torch?
Okay.
And how can we actually see his influence in their work? Okay, so we've talked about Tarantino and Rodriguez. I mean, they're both heavily inspired by Leone.
Yeah, they are. But are there any directors out there that carry his torch in maybe a less obvious way?
I think that's a great point. I mean, influence isn't always about just directly imitating someone,
Yeah,
right?
not at all.
Sometimes it's more about capturing their spirit,
Yeah.
their approach to storytelling. So who comes to mind when you think about those subtler echoes of Leone?
Well, one director I think we should highlight is Nicholas Winding Refn.
Oh, interesting.
His films like Drive and Only God Forgives have this very deliberate visual style.
Oh, yeah. And he's not afraid to use slow pacing and minimal dialogue to really build the atmosphere.
I can see that. There's like this coolness to Refn's characters, a certain detachment.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like Leone Refn understands the power of music.
Oh, yeah.
His soundtracks are often electronic and pulsating, but they serve the same purpose as Morricone's scores.
Right.
To create a mood, to build tension, and to draw the viewer into the world of the film.
Another director I see a connection with, and this might seem kind of surprising, is Christopher Nolan.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, Nolan's known for his complex narratives, but he's also a master of visual spectacle.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the way he uses those IMAX cameras in Interstellar
Oh.
to capture the vastness of space, or those incredible action sequences in Inception.
Right.
There's a grandeur to his filmmaking that kind of echoes Leone's epic westerns.
I see what you mean. And like, Leone Nolan's not afraid to let a scene breathe, even if it means slowing down the pace.
for a more atmospheric approach.
Exactly. And they both have this knack for creating such iconic imagery.
Right.
Whether it's the man with no name,
Yeah.
standing in the desert with his poncho and a cigarillo,
Yeah.
or Batman silhouetted against the Gotham skyline.
It's true.
Their films are just full of these unforgettable visuals.
It really is remarkable how Leone's influence just keeps rippling through cinema, even in the work of directors who might not seem directly connected to his style.
It speaks to the power of his vision.
Yeah, it does.
And the enduring appeal of those themes that he explored, good versus evil, greed and redemption. The search for identity in a world that's chaotic.
And those themes at their core are what makes Sergio Leone a true legend. His films are more than just entertainment. They're reflections on the human condition
That's true.
that continue to resonate with audiences across generations.
Beautifully said. I think that's the perfect note to end on.
So, for all of you listening out there, I really encourage you to revisit Leone's films or discover them for the first time if you haven't already. Pay attention to the way he uses visual, sound, and silence to tell those stories.
It's masterful.
And see if you can spot his influence in the work of other filmmakers.
It's everywhere.
You might be surprised at how far his legacy extends.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Sergio Leone.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of cinematic history.